Matt, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I'm super excited to have you back and to talk about new Eleventyseven music and then all things that are tangential to that, but still super interesting. So, Matt Langston, welcome back to the show.
It is so good to be on a show where we can toss around terms like tangential.
Isn't
I think
it,
I said that right. Is it tangential or tangential or tangential?
I don't know. I'm going to have to look it up to make sure I know what it means, but still, it sounded good in the moment.
Let's roll with it.
We're going to edit all that out. It's going to hit the cutting room floor faster than something that hits the floor quickly. So, Matt, here's the thing. I mean, you have been so busy lately. And the last time we talked was like right before, I think, the Eleventylife Podcast launched. And you guys were, I guess at that point, had officially announced that you were going to make some new music, or that was at least in process and in talks. And here we are. You guys have started a crowdfunding campaign. It's going really, really well. The new music is further along than you guys have been in just about 7 years. How are things feeling at this point?
I think that they feel a little bit surreal, because we weren't like we actually didn't know what was going to happen with the release campaign. Mm-hmm. We were just like, if we do this campaign, it'll make it a lot easier for us to kind of do everything that we want to do through our label Rock Candy, as opposed to going around and banging on the doors of all these labels that are scared of us to begin with, because they're like, oh gosh, well, what are they going to say? But yeah, so I don't know, man. I think I think we kind of put ourselves out there, and I kind of forgot a little bit of what it was like to be Matt from Eleventyseven for a little while, and it was fun. it was kind of fun to just be Matt from the Jellyrox for a little while.
Right. Let's delve into that just a little bit. I mean, is that weird to go from being kind of the guy who's responsible for kind of maintaining a direction of a band to going to where you can kind of do whatever you want because it's your thing, it's exclusively your thing, you can do as much or as little as you please, and now you're back in kind of the helm of a group of guys again? I mean, how does that mess with your psyche? I
actually think it's really fun. I feel like we were all in, like in Eleventy, we were all in a little bit of arrested development, mm-hmm. and that's what was making those final years of Eleventy feel a little bit weird and odd, and just like, do we hate each other? Do we love each other? Are we getting divorced? Are we going to make it work for the kids?
Yeah.
Like, what are we going to do? What does it look like? And then it was literally just like, hey, let's give it a minute, and that minute just happened to turn into like 6 years, but. It was good. And like throughout the course of that time, all of our relationship dynamics sort of changed. Like Davey and I became really close and started working on some other projects together. And we ended up our families went on vacation together, I think fall of 2016.
Okay.
And we were just like hanging out on the beach together. And he was like, let's do it. I think it's time. And I knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I think you're right. I think we should just kind of let bygones be bygones and see what we can do together.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So.
Now, how much do you think the time apart has informed or changed the music that you're creating now as opposed to the music that you guys might have created together towards the end of 11.0? I mean, what's the difference?
Well, I think it's all still pretty terrible. But we'll see what everybody else has to say about it. It's fun. It's really cool because I think we figured out a really cool way to work together. So like, I've produced stuff for Davey's band in the past, and we work really well in those roles where it's like one of us is the creator and the other person is the soundboard.
Right.
Like, or I guess I should say sounding board. Where it's like one person comes up with ideas, and the other person helps filter the ideas.
Right.
And as long as one of us are doing those, like one of those things, we just kind of pick one and commit. It works really well. So it's like with the Eleventy stuff, it would probably feel really weird if all of a sudden Davey started writing all of it, and then I was just telling him yes or no. And then with the Eleventy stuff, it's kind of the exact opposite, where I'll come up with a bunch of ideas and I'll call Davey and be like, hey, is this stupid or not? And trying to figure out a good way to tell me whether or not something is stupid is a full-time job. So he's he's really great at it.
Somebody needs to make an app for that. It's just called the Matt is Stupid app. And it's just, you can just have it on in the background all the time. And then randomly you'll say something and then you'll hear, beep, Matt, that's stupid. And then you just go.
Is it called Breaking the News? It's the Breaking the News app. We have to come up with a way to tell Matt he just had a dumb idea without him being self-loathing about it.
All it is when you hold up your phone to look at it, it's just the selfie mode camera, so you just see yourself, and then you're just like, oh, yeah, right. I remember now.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just like a big thumbs down that appears over your face.
Right.
You're like, oh, yeah.
No. That would be fantastic. Oh, dear. So at the time that we're recording this, you guys have already surpassed the original goal on this crowdfunding campaign, which is, I know we talked a little bit before we started recording, is not necessarily what you guys expected, but, you know, you kind of are hopefully optimistic about it. But where do you think that comes from? I mean, do you think that fans have been like eagerly awaiting this, or what do you attribute to that kind of success?
I think I would just say, like, man, I think we're really fortunate. Like, we've said it for forever that we have some of the most dedicated and rabid fans of ours, and we don't deserve them. We're not really sure why they still like us or why they still spend money on us. But I think that was one of the catalysts to us sort of getting back together was just having a bunch of, like, the emails were just constantly always coming in. Like, I was getting a few every week that would be like, hey, when are you guys going to make new music? And I'm like, hey, we don't really do that anymore. We're just kind of, we're not really interested. And then I was like, what if we just actually gave people what they wanted? Right. That's a novel idea.
Yeah. Would that be easier and less time consuming than answering all of these emails?
Right. Exactly. So I was like, all right, I can either write a bunch of emails back or I can make a record and everybody will shut up.
Right. It's like my child. She's 2 years old and you'll tell her to do something and she'll throw a fit for 5 minutes about something that would have taken 30 seconds to do. And you're like, if you just did it, it'd just be over with and you wouldn't have to worry about it anymore.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's the truth. I was probably that kid. Yeah.
Well, I know I was that kid, so I can't really point fingers too harshly, but still.
Yeah. But no, it's great. It feels really good. A lot of the creative decisions that we made when we were making this record were kind of like, let's step back from the band for a minute. And if we were the fans, what would get us really excited about Eleventy? Like, what have people been asking us to do for a long time? Or what are the moments in songs or the songs that people kind of gravitate towards the most? Let's make it all of that, but even bigger and louder and brighter and with more unicorns.
Oh, okay. So it's all going to sound like the folk album that you guys did, the Attack of the Mountain Melody or whatever.
No. Okay, I lied about all of it. Yeah. You caught me, Paul.
No, but in all seriousness, just as an aside, that still remains one of my favorites. All joking put over to the left. I really enjoy that record, and I know that is not like the most typical or classic Eleventyseven, whether in the way it was recorded or the style or anything else. So it's still one of my favorites. So I'll just throw that out there.
Well, you're very kind, Paul. You're very kind. Yeah, I don't think it's going to sound anything like that. Okay. Just for everybody who's like, hey, are they joking? What's going on here? I hate them. Yeah, it's just big synthesizers, big guitars, lots of fun stuff. It's like, I would describe it as the kind of music that, like, makes you press the gas pedal just a little bit harder than you normally would when you're in the car.
Ooh.
Yeah, so you kind of like grip the steering wheel. You're feeling it, You got your Taco Bell. It seems like a lot of our fans eat Taco Bell for some reason.
A tank full of gas. I mean, hence the Taco Bell. All those things.
Right, because if you're eating Taco Bell, surely you can afford a little bit of gas.
Right.
Yeah.
Way to explain it away and make it cleaner. I liked that. That was good.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so with the stretch goal, you guys have announced kind of like the different levels. Run through that real quick. I mean, it's up on your Facebook page. It's up on my Facebook page. But for those who are too lazy to do that and are just on Snapchat, like the kids are these days, tell people a little bit about what the stretch goals are for the campaign.
Well, I don't have them in front of me right now, but I did come up with them like a few hours ago. Hopefully I can remember that far back. I think it's just stuff where, we were like, let's come up with goals that are fun for everybody to get behind. Like, what if we came up with some goals that were like, hey, the more people that we get to support our campaign, the more free stuff we can give to everybody. And that was kind of the idea behind it, was like, okay, well, if we can get like a little bit extra money in one of the lower goals, then we totally have enough money and time to be able to devote to putting out like B-sides and remixes. And then if we have a little bit more time, then we'd have finances and resources to be able to go shoot some more music videos, and then so on and so forth. But it's like, we want to be able to give all of that away for free. Like, let's create content that you can get
right
as a backer, and you can get it before everybody else does.
Absolutely.
We had thought about like doing like really stupid stretch goals just to see if anybody like was paying attention.
Right.
So it's like, send Matt and Davey to Italy. Like, oh, for what? Well, for vacation. What else would we go there for? No, but that's we do feel really fortunate that seriously, the response for us, we feel like, has been really overwhelming, and we can't thank everybody who's donating and getting cool stuff from us enough, because you really do keep the engine going, and we love it. It's like, this band has been one of the funnest things I've ever done in my life. So yeah, it's cool to share it with other people.
Fantastic. You guys have been doing the Eleventylife Podcast, which, for those of you who don't know, somehow this is a podcast that Matt and the rest of the band and a couple of other people who are kind of on the peripheries do about Eleventyseven and other things related to Eleventyseven. You guys started at a pretty good bit. You guys started it fairly early in the process of the whole record. Do you think that having done that and kind of seeding yourself back into the consciousness of fans helped with the crowdfunding in general?
Yeah, I think so. I think that we had a few ideas of what we wanted the podcast to accomplish, and so far I feel like it's doing that, which is, number one, we wanted a way to kind of re-engage with fans and with friends, and we wanted an excuse to kind of pull in some friends of ours. And the other facet of that was like, man, we haven't talked about a lot of this stuff openly. Like, we haven't talked about almost the last decade of our life openly, like in some cases even with our families or parents or whatever. And so it was just kind of like, it was a really fun way to go back and sort of follow it from day one of like, well, how did we end up in a band, or how did we end up here, and how did we end up feeling the ways that we do about relationships and about religion and about church and about life in general. And like, yeah, so it's been cool to talk it out with your friends, you know what I mean? And that's kind of the format. It's like, we all get together for a weekend and we put some topics up there in front of us, and then immediately, we've got 10 or 12 stories that we can tell kind of pertaining to that one thing. So it's just kind of exploring what all the dark and dirty stuff in Eleventy, for maybe lack of a better term. But I just call it interesting. I think it's probably the more interesting facet of what was happening behind the scenes with our band, and with other people's bands too. So
yeah, for sure. Has there been any? I'm sure there's been plenty of positive responses to the podcast. I thoroughly enjoy it, but has there been any pushback or complaints or outcry from fans who just weren't ready to hear some of what you guys had to say about Eleventy's past?
No.
Well, that's good.
Oddly enough. I mean, I'm sure that maybe we got, a few emails, but they're all more like inquisitive kind of things. It's not like, I can't believe you said that on the podcast. I can't believe you guys would go about, believing this or believing that or changing this or about your band. It's more like, hey, so tell me more about that. Or some people just like don't want to believe
right,
that some of the stuff happened. So they're like, hey, you guys need to quit lying about that. And we're like, what? We didn't. No, all that happened. It actually happened. Like, sorry. But yeah, you know how it is. I
yes.
think that we're constantly wanting for things to become more honest, for conversations to become more candid. Because we feel like there's something really beautiful in that. There's something beautiful in being able to be honest with people and being able to say, hey, you know what? I struggle with this, or I'm not sure what I think about this thing, or I'm not sure how to do this next phase of life. And sometimes just hearing somebody else going through that kind of empowers you and makes you feel like, oh, wow, I can do that too. I can keep putting one foot in front of the other. So, yeah, hopefully that's what the podcast is doing. And there's a little bit of drama sprinkled in there too, for good measure.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my addictions for podcasts recently have been the Labeled podcast, which is kind of the history behind Tooth and Nail and different bands they're in, and kind of
is that good?
It's interesting. Some episodes are better than others, and not every band they cover now I horribly care about, but I thrive on the backstories of that sort of thing. I could listen to that and the 11tyseven podcast all day just because like that is so interesting. And of course, it's a glimpse behind the curtain in for everyone who's never been in a band inside this world that feels like it ought to be magical, and then you go in the back and it's all just not less magical, more steampunk. It's like it's all working somehow, but you're not really quite sure how it is because you always hear about they're best friends and they live their lives together and they go around, they play shows and like, no, they kind of hate each other sometimes. Oh, they have real problems, So yeah, and I mean, the good thing is that I've been listening to that one side by side with yours. So any problems that you guys have had have paled in comparison to the ones that like I'm hearing about, like from Under Oath or some of the other bands that I didn't know anything about their backstory at all. I'm like, oh dang,
yeah,
wow, the 11 guys had it all together. So.
I don't know if that's true.
Oh man, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just strange, and everyone's got their own problems, and I don't mean to make it sound like somebody is lesser so having issues than the next, because your issues are your issues, regardless of how big or small they are by a worldly scale or whatever. But
and you would know this because you're a radio guy and like a great conversationalist. But like one of the things that the podcast has taught me is that there is this really interesting fine line between being able to have a really healthy and uncomfortably honest conversation about something and then just exploiting another person's life experience.
Right.
Yeah. Or experiencing like drama that they've had in their life. And I think that it's definitely it's helping us gain a new sensitivity to what the difference in those things are. Like, because at the end of the conversation, do you feel more healed? Do you feel known a little bit more? Or do you just kind of feel like, oh man, now the whole world knows how messed up I am?
Right. Yeah.
This sucks. Yeah. So
I totally know what you mean. Oh man. Well, on a slightly less serious note, whenever I saw the announcement that the new record was going to be called Rad Science, my immediate reaction was, man, it's a pity there isn't an award for album title of the year, because that would be right up there. And then I remembered something else. I was like, well, but if there was, Jeremy Camp would come out with a self-titled record and it would win album title of the year. And it would just be sad.
Oh my gosh. He'd come out with an album and there would just be like a really crappy cartoon tint on it and it would just be called Camp.
Yeah.
And that's how he'd win. And everybody would lose their mind. It'd be like, 11 who? We're all about the new Camp album.
That's right. Well, see, what I would like though is I've heard rumors about Jeremy Camp that he was like a really big fan of like Christian black metal back in the day. So like he was into Zao and other heavy groups like that. I'm like, how does he even know who those bands are and put out the music that he puts out? I don't understand. There's actually, I'm pretty sure there still is an online petition for Jeremy Camp to make a metal album. Everyone's like, he knows how to play guitar. He's kind of ripped. He knows all of this stuff. He needs to just stop it and make a metal record just so that we can all say that he did it. And then he can move on to whatever he wants to.
Oh, but like, would this be the whole like Garth Brooks, Chris Gaines fiasco all over again? Do you remember that?
I certainly do.
Okay, I don't know how many listeners would remember that, but that was like the big scandal of the late '90s. I feel like, or early 2000s, or whatever.
See, now that's what I think is truly funny is whenever somebody is so huge and so like proficient or good or famous for one thing that they're like, you know what? Forget that. I want something that's challenging, so that's how you end up with Chris Gaines or Michael Jordan playing baseball and all these other things that happened in the 90s where you're just like, stop it. Just do what you're good at. Everyone wishes that they could do the one thing you do really, really well, and you're not doing it right now. Just do it. It's just sick and wrong, man.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I know. It's a crazy world we live in, Paul.
Yes, it is. Oh man. Well, now that we've gone off the serious note, I'm going to throw us right back into a serious question. One of the things that has been somewhat of a theme throughout the Eleventylife podcast is the tension that comes between being a band that is not necessarily a ministry-focused band that is made up of Christians, Christ followers, but who aren't really intent on being a quote-unquote Christian band. How do you feel like that tension has been heightened or dissipated over the time since you guys have been on a label?
Man, that's a really great question, Paul. Oh my God. Normally your questions are god awful, but this really takes the cake. No.
You're like, this has nothing to do with Powerpuff Girls. Just stop it.
I know. You're looking for like one incriminating soundbite to make everyone mad.
Well, and in all honesty, this may not make the cut because our interview is already longer than we'll air. So it may make the online only version. So feel free to be candid about it. But I'm just curious as to what you think. This question is probably maybe more for me than it is for the average person who checks out the Christian Rock 20. So feel free to be as honest as you want to be.
Yeah, well, so like in this new season of Eleventylife, we actually have a pretty heated discussion about this. Because it's obviously you know that Matt Lott from Waverly is on this season, and so he's been a really awesome part of all these conversations, and he also provides a really cool perspective that I feel like the three of us wouldn't normally land on. That's kind of what I love is just the fact that the conversation is ongoing. If I could say, or if I had to say, like today, this is how I feel about it, it's that I really like having the conversation, and I find myself a little more in the camp of whatever gets your attention gets you. So if you want to sit here and you want to pick apart what Christian music is and how flawed you think it is and everything that's wrong with it and all of the hurt and all of the baggage and stuff that you have from it, and or even Christianity for that matter, like I think you can do it with anything that you want. Like if that's what you want to give your focus and that's what you want to fill your heart with, then I mean, ultimately that grows into something that is not the best of you. You know, it's a muted version of you. It's a bitter and crusty and crispy you. So I think we're just kind of zooming out and we're like, you know what? We don't really know. I think to be a Christian band means a lot of different things to different people. And this is one of the things that we talk about on the podcast is where it's like, you can say to one person, oh yeah, well, I'm in a Christian band. But if you tell me you're in a Christian band, I think something totally different than what, the average person would be like, oh, you sing about God. You know what I mean? And that's where the buck stops. It's like for some people. So I think we're just kind of like not really concerned with the label, not to sound like a 14-year-old in his first relationship, but we're just not into labels. We're figuring it out and just trying to do right by everybody. and have some really interesting conversations that we feel like help people or encourage them in their faith or in their lack of faith or wherever they are. Is that?
I think that's probably fair enough. I mean, it's interesting, and this also probably will not make the version of the show, the version that makes it onto the show. But along the same lines, I'm having a conversation with the lead singer for the Classic Crime, I think day after tomorrow, and it's going to be a web exclusive interview, and mainly because they've released their new record and they have one song that drops the F-bomb on it. And of course, needless to say, there are a lot of people who have had issue with that. You know, and I have my own feelings about it, which of course are shaped by the fact that I run a show that will never be able to play that song and now is put in a weird position. And I have a selfish view of, well, why did you do this to me? Just as I'm sure a lot of parents do when they're like, well, I can't buy this album for my kid. And I actually liked this band for my kid before this. And a lot of it has just kind of come out a lot of bitterness, obviously, from his perspective, just because he's like, look, I'm the only Christian in my band. I write songs from my perspective, but I've never signed up to be a ministry band. We play music. We are not, nor have we ever been what we would consider to be a Christian band. Quit trying to stamp us with this, because what you're doing is you're putting us in a box, and we don't want to be in a box. And that doesn't shape who I am as a believer, but you need to realize that the constraints that you're putting on us are not doing us any favors, and they're just setting you up for disappointment. So why are you doing that? And
right.
So, I mean, and that's, and I, you know, and so I kind of get that. And it's kind of an interesting conversation that's being had in a few different forms and with a few different bands. So I don't know. I'm curious to see where it all goes.
I'd love to hear what he has to say. I think that's the most frustrating things. Like, as you were telling me some of his sentiments, I'm just like, yep, that's it. It's like people just want you to be one thing or the other. They want you to be anything other than you.
Right.
Like, they want you to pick a side. They want you to pick a color. They want you to pick a cause, you know, and then that's that. And it's just like, but there's so much more life out there. Like, if we could just say, you know, like, everything, like, I'm totally fine exposing myself to things that I disagree with, because how will I ever know, like, why I believe what I believe unless I understand what the alternatives are.
Right.
Or until I, like, live enough life. You know, it's like the older that we get, the more it's like, man, I don't feel anything like I did 3 years ago, because I have a totally different set of life experiences, and,
right,
you know, like, relationships season you, and they're a really beautiful thing, but gosh, they're anything but linear. I mean, they're kind of all over the place.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, you're right. I'm sure this is probably very not interesting for your listeners or whatnot, but
well, we'll see.
Gosh.
I mean, it'll make the web version, but you know, for when you've only got 20 minutes to work with for the radio show, you know, it might be a little heavy for that. But I know that there are people who, you know, there will be some people who get to this point of the interview when they're streaming it online, they'll be like, well, I'm done. And then there'll be other people who are like, wow, this actually has some substance to it. So, you know, I'm all about both of it. And I think that's okay. And that's the beauty of life now, is you can kind of find the things that you want. Which sometimes can keep you from experiencing certain things, but it is what it is. Well, on to other things that are less serious and more about band kind of stuff. Since we're going to play the single that you get if you go and do the crowdfunding thing, if you're a backer, I'm assuming at a certain minimum kind of level, you get a new single, which is called Rock Bottom, and we're going to play that during the show. Tell us about that song kind of in a nutshell.
New Rock Bottom is kind of like us figuring out how cynical we are.
Oh, so this was a good transition. Nice.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like everybody goes through that phase in life where you're just disillusioned by a lot of things. Your family or your relationships or your faith, or like all those things kind of at some point are not what you thought they were. And it's really easy to kind of have your own cynicism be your security blanket, where it's like, if I'm always cynical about everything, then I never have to be hurt by something again.
Right.
You know, I can always claim that it was always going to hurt me all along. I feel like that's the spirit of what this song is. It's basically saying like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff to be cynical about, but you know what? Like I don't know. You had got to experience a life in which you had to know what it was like before to be so cynical about how bad it got.
Yeah.
And to me, like that's why life is so fun, because you just never know. It's going to get really awesome, and then it's going to get really bad, and we constantly live in this like state of fluctuation, and one informs the other. I know it sounds like heady and dumb. All right, I ruined it. Let's start over, Paul.
No, I think that was good. I totally get it. I get what you're getting.
No, but it's awesome. But it's just like at the end of the day, you're in control over how you're going to view it.
Right.
You know, like there's a lot of stuff to be cynical about. Let's have fun with it.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So, it's funny. That makes me think of a children's book that my daughter has been addicted to. One of the statements at the end was, you can't control how you feel, but what you do with it is a different deal. And I'm like, yep, there we go. That kind of boils it down. It's true. It's true. It's a children's book written by Dolly Parton, too. That makes it even better.
Oh my gosh, this just keeps getting better and better. I knew you were going to work Dolly in this conversation somehow, Paul.
I've got a CD of her sitting. I've got her CD sitting on my desk right now. I'm looking at it. I picked it up for like $1 at a used CD store a couple of days ago. I was like, oh, sure, why not? I don't have any Dolly Parton CDs.
Try telling that to Jolene, Dolly. I'm
right.
sure that's how she feels about it too.
Yeah. Oh man. All right. So there's at least one more question that I have. Like, I will be mad at myself if I don't ask, because I was so proud of this question, and I don't often get proud of questions. So one of the things that happens in radio, and I know it happens in like retail stores of just about any kind, you make up a person who's a fictitious person whose age is the right age for the prime time that you're wanting to get to them, and either to make them listen or buy something or whatever. You usually give them a name and you kind of describe them. Like, I'm pretty sure that the radio station I work for, we probably have our audience is technically a person named Jan, who's like 32, has 2.5 kids, drives a minivan, and spends at least an hour and a half to 2 hours in the car a day. I want you to think about for just a moment and describe the target 11-7 audience member and what that person's name is, and just kind of what they might be like.
Oh my gosh.
And that is officially the longest question buildup I've ever had.
Yeah, I feel like there's no way to even start answering this without like making everyone angry.
Now this might make it worse rather than better, but this is just in your head. You don't have to speak for anybody else. We can make sure all the hate mail goes directly to you.
I think the typical 11D fan, I think I might see, I say this after years and years of being in this band, but I think I see a little bit of myself in all of, at least all the ones that I have the privilege of meeting. Because I think that they're into really nerdy stuff. I think that they like comics, they like movies, they like superhero movies. I don't know, they probably have a bit of a fascination with science to some degree. They love hanging out with their friends and doing nerdy themed parties.
Okay.
A lot of them wear glasses. A lot of them don't really have
a need for the glasses.
Yeah. Yeah, why not?
They have glasses, ironically.
Yeah. Like, I feel like we're kind of the band that a lot of people end up at when they can't find a scene that will let them in.
Oh, okay.
Or when they can't find a scene that they're cool enough for.
Okay.
They kind of end up with us.
Nice.
Which we love.
Nice. And this person who we're describing, what is this person's name? Because they have to have a name.
Oh, man. Gosh. They've got some white names.
Chad Michael Murray.
Oh my gosh, that's blindingly white name. I actually don't know, because a lot of people, I mean, like, even if you were to go on our Facebook right now, it's like everybody they're from all over the world.
Right.
So they maybe like a cool internationally fluid name or something.
Chad Takanawa.
Yeah, there we go. Oh man, that sounds like you're an Asian guy and you know pronouncing your first name right, so you're like, whatever, Chad. Just call me Chad.
Yes, absolutely. Oh man. Well, one of the other questions that I wanted to make sure that I did work in, and I'm sure we'll talk again. I can ask you some of these other ones at some other point, but this is getting ridiculously long, so I don't want to I don't want to make it go too much longer. But one of the things when 11tyseven ended, and you were kind of picking up the Jellyrox mantle and kind of making that the main focus at that point. One of the things that stuck out to me, as happens a lot with other people going from a full-time band to a full-time side project, is saying, I wrote a bunch of songs that didn't fit for the band, and so I started doing this thing. And for you, that was the Jellyrox, and you had some songs that were, originally thought of as 11ty songs until you were finished, and then you're like, this doesn't work. Were there any songs that were the reverse of that for you, where it started off as like, I'm going to write this cool Jellyrox song, and you're like, oh man, but this is an 11ty song, but 11ty isn't around anymore. Were there any of those that bubbled to the surface with this reuniting?
Yeah, absolutely. Two of my favorite cuts off of this album are a song called Inside Out and another one called Kick the Habit.
Okay.
And they're really synth heavy. And they probably would have ended up on whatever the album after Bang & Whimper would have been for Jellyrox. But instead it was like we kind of picked up guitars and put some guitars on them. And now they're 11ty songs, and I'm really happy with them.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess those are two very distinct cases in which they worked in reverse, exactly what you're talking about.
Nice.
Yeah. So, but I also think everybody kind of had a little bit of time to get on board with the Jellyrox stuff too. I mean, like in my band.
Yeah.
So it's they used to give me a really hard time. And granted, like some of that early Jellyrox stuff is a little much. It's a little hard to handle. And it's like, it's just now after like Bang & Whimper came out that the guys were like, it's not so bad. So, yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Sweet deal, man. Well, dude, the last question I've got for you is one that I'm sure I've asked before, but since things have changed a lot over the last few months and the band's back together, you guys have a new record that's ready to be released, and success is happening again, or maybe for the first time, depending on how you look at it. What do you think at this point is the most un-rock and roll thing about you?
Oh, man. Will you accept 11tyseven as an answer?
Sure.
My band? It's actually I've had that happen to me so many times. Like my brother-in-law works at this place down the river. They put people into the river and like float them down it during the summer.
Are they alive?
And yeah. They're like most of them are. Yeah. Survivor's guilt over here.
Well, I was wondering if it was that or he just specialized in Viking funerals. I was very confused.
Yeah, so it's kayaking and canoeing and Viking funerals. Yeah, that's it.
All right.
So that's what they do, and he was like, yeah. So my brother-in-law Matt plays in this band, and everybody's like, oh yeah, okay, cool. And he's like, yeah, man, they're pretty rocking. It's pretty heavy stuff, and everybody's like, ooh, wow, that's pretty cool. And like clearly he had never heard any of our music before, or else he would have kept his mouth shut. And so they're like, well, pull it up on Spotify, man. So then like pull it up on Spotify, and it's like, of course, like Evil Genius comes on, and they're kind of all like looking at each other, like,
is there more than one band who has this name?
Is that yeah? Did you spell that name right? What was the name again?
Are you sure it's not 11ty8?
Right. Yeah, it's just that dumb. I'm sorry. Yeah. But yeah.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. Well, dude, it's always such a pleasure to have you on the show. I know that things have been just in a fun way rather nuts in your world, and I couldn't be more happy for it to be crazy for you. I know that this has been kind of a long time coming, and I know that a lot of people, including myself, are looking forward to the new record. And dude, great job.
Well, I really appreciate it.